everyone, and welcome back. Today we're talking about House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 5, We Light the Way. And that was a beautiful episode, right? I love this whole theme of awakening. And Sir Cristian's journey from the start of the episode to the end was just fantastic, right? And it was paralleled by Alicent's journey as well. And so things are looking a lot worse, right? Things will get worse before they get better. In terms of this wedding, this had to be the saddest wedding I have ever seen. I mean, the only thing keeping Rhaenyra alive is her father. Because even if Rhaenyra gets to the Iron Throne, I mean, she's gonna have to fight to, keep herself there, right? Like, she needs to fight for respect. People were barely bending the knee that first episode when he kind of named her as his successor. And so things are getting worse, right? And people are kind of smelling the blood in the water, especially since, this king is on his way to his deathbed. So the episode starts off with Daemon killing his wife. And it occurred to me this episode that Daemon was married off, right? Like, his disdain for his wife had to do with the fact that she basically owned him, right? And it's not that she was ugly, it's that she was the man in the relationship, so he felt demasculated. In terms of these issues he's having, like what the cause of that is, I'm not sure. Maybe they'll unpack that in other episodes, but he came to kill her, right? He looked at her like, it's time. I'm done with you. And again, it seems like his masculinity was challenged by this woman. She didn't really have any respect for him until her dying breath, right? Like, she didn't even bother negotiating with him. She was just like, at least finish this job since you can't finish anything else. And so Daemon wants the Iron Throne, and now that his wife is dead, he stands to inherit everything that she owns. And so at this point, I think he's just getting ammunition for when he needs to, for better or worse, get to that throne any means necessary. Which takes us to the lead up to this wedding. And the lead up to the wedding pretty much foreshadows how little they will respect Rhaenyra and how much they're pretty much done with this king. Like, the problem with the king is that he's not really a king. He's like an academic. Like, he's not really meant for that life, right? He's throwing up on the ship. He's just sick and tired of being sick and tired. He has to watch everybody kind of doing all this disrespectful stuff around him. Like, his threshold for disrespect is quite high. And you see that when he goes to this lord's house. So finally, they're trying to marry off Rhaenyra. And I mean, this process was creepy because they all grew up together. But it was also like, he was just exhausted, right? He gets there. He's not even greeted by this lord, right? His kids come out talking about, their dad had a long journey, blah, blah, blah. And you could see Lyonel, his new, hand, just, his face throughout this episode was very funny. He was just over it. He was just like, oh, how much disrespect can one man take? At some point he was just looking at the king like, are you really, you're really flexible. So they make him do this whole song and dance where he has to go to the lord. And this whole sequence of the lord coming down the steps from his kind of throne and then bending the knee was a bit performative, right? As if to say there's no meaning behind the action. I'm bending the knee as a formality, but there's no power behind it. It's just song and dance. The disrespect is there. Again, people are smelling blood in the water. This conversation is important for two reasons. One, the king learns that his brother killed his wife, even though that's not what was said. Everybody knows that Daemon did it. There's no doubt that he killed his wife, right? He's not about to expose his brother, but his face said it all. He's like, oh, how did I know this was going to happen? And the second conversation had to do with, names and the politics of it. So the lord is like, listen, you need my son more than I need your daughter. So in the event that I allow my son to marry your daughter, what do I get? And what he wants is the last name, right? He's saying, listen, when our kids have kids, I'm going to need them to have my last name. And the king was looking at him. He's tired. He's sick. He can barely stand. The whole joke about him, do you need a chair? Do you need a chair? That was so condescending. And again, it just shows you his threshold, right? He was just taking a lot of disrespect right there. And the king was like, listen, I don't got time for this. In the event that one of your raggedy kids takes the throne, it's going to be under the name Targaryen. Point blank and period. And if you have a problem with that, well, that sounds like a you problem. And so the lord and his wife Rhaenys, they agreed to it, but they agreed to it knowing that they can most definitely alter these plans. And, you know, surprisingly, despite the sort of desperation from the king, Rhaenyra and Lenore, they actually do make a good match, right? Because Rhaenyra in the last episode kind of learned from her uncle that, listen, just because you're getting married doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Like, you can still do you. Like, this is just a formality, but it shouldn't stop you from living your best life. And so Rhaenyra really took that to heart, right? She's having a conversation with Lenore, and she's like, listen, you're not my type and I'm not your type. So let's just have these kids, and then, you know, like, discretion is key. Like, I'll cover for you if you cover for me. Like, that was kind of the energy she was giving. He was looking at her like pleasantly surprised, right? He's like, I could do that. And the thing is, like, he's a good match for her because unlike someone, you know, like one of the Lannisters, like, he would have been all over her, right? So at least with this, like, she has some power in terms of like how they can arrange it. So everything is looking good, except Rhaenys is very much worried about her son, and for good reason, right? So Rhaenys, she's like, are we sure we're gonna give our son to this family? Because first of all, there is a rightful heir. And second of all, like, there's gonna be bloodshed and our son is gonna die. So Rhaenys is worried for her son because anybody associated with Rhaenyra will probably be in danger. And second, by the end of the episode, you get the sense that Lenore is more likely to, you know, get himself killed than to be killed, especially like, you know, what happened at the end. Like, he's angry, or like that sadness is going to convert to anger, and who knows what's going to happen. But for the time being, everything is peaceful, right? We cut away, we see Lenore and his significant other, right? Like, they're having a great time and they're thinking like, this is great. But Lenore's sort of, you know, partner is thinking like, listen, why does she want to make this arrangement? Like, who is she with? Like, who's her sneaky link? You know, like, who's the person that she's gonna go off to see? And I think it is true, curiosity kills the cat. Like, they should have just let sleeping dogs lie, right? And that sleeping dog was Sir Cristian, and I really felt bad for him. So on one hand, you have Lenore, you have, you know, his partner, and they're happy, and they're like, yeah, this is gonna be great. And then you have Sir Cristian, who's like, excuse me? So the arrangement is made, and Sir Cristian, you know, the one thing that was very clear to me is that he's an excellent listener, right? He kind of comes up to Rhaenyra on their way back, and he's like, listen, so you're about to get married, and it's time to go. You know, I've been listening to you complain about the throne for the past God knows how long, and I think I've thought about an exit plan. And from this conversation, I understood that she will do anything for the Iron Throne, because she was not even having it, right? She was like, listen, to love me is to love the crown, right? Like, we are one in the same. And not only that, she kind of looked at him like, you want me to give up my crown for some oranges? Like, the thing is, like, she wasn't even thinking about it. Like, she was just done with it. He was confused. He's like, okay, so basically I've dishonored myself. And the only way, and I understand Sir Cristian's point, like, basically he was like, I did this for love. And I think some part of him fantasized them running away together, or at least, and even I thought about it at some point. I thought just like, because her father did give her a lot of freedom to pick who she wanted to marry. And so for a while, I really thought she would pick Sir Cristian. I don't know why, like I thought it. And I think Daemon kind of changed her mind in terms of her views on marriage, but Sir Cristian was not completely wrong for thinking that it was possible and that the king might accept him. Like, I kind of get where his mind was coming from, but, you know, Rhaenyra was not having it. She's like, listen, you can be my side piece forever. Like, I got you. Like, what's the problem? And he's like, side piece. And, you know, even when he walks away, like, the thing with Rhaenyra is like, she has this prophecy in her head. And at some point, it just sounded like a tarot reading, right? She's like, listen, the great whatever. And he's like, he just walks away. He doesn't want to hear this history, right? He's like, what are you talking about? And, you know, it's clear that baby wants power, right? Like, Rhaenyra wants the throne. And the way that she was talking to Sir Cristian, he was just kind of a doll for her, like someone to play with. And for him, he was just like, no. Cristian is unraveling, right? He's totally unraveling. And this, I mean, he's like literally on the edge, right? Like, he's on the edge throughout this episode until he eventually explodes. And the first sign of like his unraveling is when he's called into Alicent's chambers to be questioned. So earlier in the episode, Alicent is approached by, correct me if I'm wrong, but that man in the courtyard, that was one of Lyonel's sons, I believe. I don't know if I'm right or wrong in saying that, but he basically was like, oh, did you hear about the tea? Like giving her the literal tea, you know, basically putting doubt in Alicent's mind that, listen, whatever you were told about Rhaenyra, like, it ain't true. Like, she's messy. I heard about some Plan B tea. And the way he played it was super smart because he was still like, whew, thank God, like, I'm wrong. But Alicent has been very frustrated, right? She's unhappy. Every episode, she seems to get more unhappy. Every time I see her with her kids, she just looks like she's over it. Even the thought of children, you could just tell she's not having a great time. And also, her father has been banished, right? And just before he leaves, he kind of warns her. He's like, listen, I don't know what to tell you, but your kids are going to be put to the sword if you don't figure out a way to put her to the sword, right? His logic is like, this is going to get ugly. The reality is they're not going to accept a woman. If they did, they would have accepted Rhaenys, right? And his logic is correct. And he's like, listen, are you going to protect your kids or are you just going to wait for them to die? And I think for Alicent, she was always more loyal to her father than anybody else in that house. And watching him leave, again, there's nobody from her house there, right? Like, she's just there alone. So I think that started to kind of unravel her. So she calls Sir Cristian in and she's like, listen, I heard somebody was doing some things out here. And immediately he's like, yes, and it was with me. And Alicent's doubt, you know, like, she wasn't expecting that, right? She was expecting him to say, listen, yeah, I saw him with Daemon. But now Daemon is out of her mind, right? Now she's thinking, oh, Rhaenyra lied to me. My dad was, you know, like, now she's confused. That's the vibe I felt from Alicent. Like, one way or another, Rhaenyra lied to her. Was it the lie that she was expecting? No. And she was shocked, right? And Sir Cristian is like, listen, kill me now. Like, I'm done. I don't care anymore. Like, please, And Sir Cristian is a very honest man. Like, he's not one that hides in the shadows. Like, this is very painful for him. So the fact that he so comfortably told her, you know, it does suggest it was a appropriate foreshadowing for what was going to happen at the end, because he wasn't about to let anyone, you know, hang anything over his head, right? Like, he was openly being like, listen, you can kill me. It is what it is. And Alicent lets him go, and she lets him go because she doesn't know what to do with herself, right? She's like, and again, she's kind of like the king in that way, where she's not a queen. Like, she's just kind of like, I mean, I'm not gonna kill you. You know, she looked at him like, I'm not gonna, like, why would I do all that? And so the effect it has on her is that she starts kind of mobilizing an army, which is the same as what Daemon is doing, right? Except he was the only one doing it consciously. So now Alicent is like, I'm getting resources together. I need people on my side. I need people who are honest and loyal. And, you know, the gears start turning in her head. You know, during one of the king's final moments, like, everybody knows this king is gonna die. And Alicent is wondering, like, what's gonna happen to her kids when this man is gone? And, you know, during these last moments, like, you can see the king's hand. He has scabs all over. And, you know, shout out to Lyonel, because he was like hand of the queen for a moment, because at some point, you know, after they're done trying to put the leeches on him, like, nothing they're doing is working, like, he's dying. I think he had the audacity to be like, call in, what did he say, call, like, where's the queen? And he's like, I think she's busy. Like, you're gross. Like, no, like, we're not gonna call her in. And he kind of sits there and he's like, well, how will I be remembered? You know, like, how, like, my legacy, like, Lyonel, tell me the truth. Like, was I a good king? Will I be remembered? You know, like, songs are only written about the great. And Lyonel was like, listen, you're kind of like the George Bush of kings here. Like, you didn't really do nothing. Like, you didn't do nothing. It was a time of peace. And the only thing the king did was put his daughter to the throne, right? Like, the irony being, like, all the things that, like, she will end up being the most memorable thing about him. And I think some part of him, like, that's probably why he put her on the throne. I feel like, just so at least he's remembered for something. Like, it wasn't entirely selfless, his decision to put her there. And Lyonel just keeps it all the way real. He's like, I mean, like, you were fine. Like, you were, and that's the thing about the king, right? Like, all his victories were not because of him, right? Like, the stepstones, like, it kind of happened despite him. You know, and Lyonel was like, I don't know how to say that without saying that. He's never been tested, and meanwhile, his daughter is about to ascend the throne, and these guys barely bent the knee for her. So finally, we get to this wedding, and the way this wedding was choreographed was amazing, right? From the dance to the entrances. Like, when House Velaryon came in, I was like, they were the real kings on that. Like, everything about this last scene was so perfect, right? The lead up to it, the looks, the face acting, like, it was on point. So originally it was supposed to be 7 days of tournaments and feasts. It was supposed to be this grand sort of event, but all that was fast forwarded to like a few hours, right? And from the start, like, I love how everything was foreshadowed, right? Like, from what Sir Cristian did at the end to even just what the queen was about to do, right? So from the beginning, Jason Lannister comes up and he's like, how y'all doing? Like, you remember me? And again, I think Rhaenyra would have had a hard time with Jason. He kind of makes a comment. He's like, so where's the queen? You know, like, where's she at? Like, let me say hi to her. And the king is like, well, she's getting herself ready. And then I think the Lannister says, oh, well, that's why they don't go to war or something. Like, they'd be late all the time. And it's ironic because, like, again, like, the queen is going to war and she's not late. Right, she's actually right on time. So that whole commentary with Jason just before the queen comes in was like really, really smooth, I thought. And you could cut the tension with a knife. Everybody's looking at everybody, but you don't know what information everyone is looking for, right? So Lenore's partner is looking for whoever Rhaenyra is with. You know, these houses are just staring down at each other, and you know, Alicent's entrance probably had to be one of the best scenes because she came in wearing green, and I guess green is the color that they kind of send out from their lighthouse when they're calling their people to war. So that was a very strong statement. She comes in green, she comes in like dramatic, right? Like walking down those steps. And not only that, she calls Rhaenyra her stepdaughter. She's like, congratulations, stepdaughter. I was like, and I don't know how you guys feel about that, like this whole stepdaughter, no husband, no wife. Was that in Game of Thrones? Because I feel like it wasn't, but it's so off-putting. You know, like when Alicent said it, it was like, I'm coming for you. But when the other characters say it, like, it's weird. And so she had some fighting words. Shout out to her uncle who came, like only her uncle was there from her house to support her. Like, again, she feels kind of alone. And she's doing her best to gather the troops. So Daemon shows up and he is confident, right? He's kind of walking up to the throne like he's about to take the king's seat. He sits down. Everybody's looking at him knowing damn well that he killed his wife. At one point, someone from his wife's house comes up to him and says, hey, I know what you did. And the interesting thing is, like, nobody really defends Daemon because he like 1000% did it. And so Daemon is also up, you know, he's up for grabs, right? So, you know, he was being courted as well, but the only person he was interested in is Rhaenyra. And just before, like, that fight broke out, I don't know what Daemon would have done. Like, Daemon was about ready to take Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra looked like she was about ready to be taken, right? So, like, she looked like she was down. And the whole time the king is, like, eating, right? Like, he's, like, cutting up his food, and his final moments were not peaceful. Like, he was, his face, he was like, that was a great scene. Like, I hope he gets an Emmy because he was really doing some solid acting. Like, he was looking over at all these messy people doing all these random things, and then the fight broke out, and I didn't really know what was happening, but Sir Cristian essentially just broke. And the reason Sir Cristian broke is very simple, is because Laenor's sort of man comes up to him at some point and says, listen, you know, side piece to side piece, like, we need to look out for each other. Like, yeah, we got to look out for these guys, but we got to look out for each other. And Sir Cristian is like, I'm not going to be blackmailed, you know, and he kind of killed him as a way of saying, I have nothing to hide, you know, like, I'm going to protect my queen regardless. And he was just angry, you know, he didn't even like that he was perceived in that way. I think it's the perception. It's one thing that he feels shame, but now that everybody else knows, I think just kind of was his breaking point. Laenor is totally devastated. He looks like, and this is the beginning of his end as well, right? Especially now that Sir Cristian lives. Like, that's going to be a source of tension between the two families. But we'll see how that unravels. But that scene with Sir Cristian about to commit suicide and then Alicent coming to save him, I mean, like, that was like angelic, right? Again, it was like his redemption. You know, he was looking to be saved. He needed another chance to restore his honor, and she kind of gave him that, right? Like she's saving him, not just from killing himself, but also saving, you know, just his reputation, hopefully, like his sense of self-worth. So that was like Sir Cristian's journey was like the most amazing thing in this episode. Like, and that's an episode you should watch again. You know, like, again, these last 2 episodes have been like rewatchable. And so that was the saddest wedding. They both lost their lovers, or almost lost their lovers, in terms of Sir Cristian. Lyonel, he can't even hide his face, like he's crying. They can't even kiss, like they just look miserable. And, you know, the king passes out. He's done. He's like, I'm done with this. I don't care anymore. The stress, the place was so dirty. You know, they just decided to get married right there, and nothing good can come out of this, right? And again, like as soon as her father dies, Rhaenyra is like, she has to watch her back, right? And she hasn't even started putting up an army. Like, her only hope is Daemon. And who knows what Daemon is thinking. So overall, that was a very solid episode. It was like a very, very well, just the lead up, like this redemption arc in one episode was just fantastic, because Sir Cristian is like, we've kind of grown attached to him, and apparently the episode switch happens next episode, and I don't really get why they switch certain characters over others. Like, I think they could have just kept Rhaenyra and put makeup on her, but I don't know. We'll see how the new actress does, but I don't know. That was a really solid episode. Anyways, you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.